Our next section is on rotations. So another type of transformation. So basically what we're doing is we're turning a shape or rotating it. So the R and the W would be the shapes that would match, or sorry, the points that would match. The S and the X, and then the T and the Y, and you can see how this thing is turning. Alright, so it'll be a little bit easier once we start graphing it. And these kind of tell you how each rotation works. I'm going to try to maybe simplify it a little bit from what we see there. Okay, so our first one is we are going to rotate 180 degrees. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I am going to draw the points. Alright, there's my shape. Okay, we have F, G, H, and J. And I'm going to rotate them 180 degrees. Okay, so each box is going to represent 90 degrees. For example, if I want to rotate point F, I'm going to highlight point F. Okay, then if I rotate counterclockwise, then 90 would be here, 180 would be here, and 270 would be here. Now, what we want to think about each quadrant is that if I have a point in this quadrant, x comma y is positive comma positive. So any answer where it ends up there has to be positive positive. Any answer where it ends up over here has to be negative comma positive. Any answer down here is negative comma negative. And any answer over here has to be positive comma negative. Alright, so I am going to erase the points. Okay, now we are going to find the points F prime, G prime, H prime, and J prime. Okay, you can look back up here in your chart to help you with 180. You can see that both numbers are going to turn opposite. I'm going to try to come up with a way that might be a little bit easier to figure that out. So if F is 2, 1, right, we know that if it's in this quadrant, where I've highlighted it, it's going to end up in this quadrant here, right, because that's 180. So I know it has to be negative, negative, so it's going to be negative 2, negative 1. So that's F prime. Okay, let's look at G. G is also positive, so that's going to end up in this quadrant over here. That's going to be G prime, and that's negative 7, negative 1. Because they both have to be negative, right, to be in that quadrant. Okay, let's look at H. If I rotate H, then it has to be here. Hold on a second. It has to be in this quadrant. Why? Because of 180, this would be 90 from H, and this would be 180 from H. And if I'm in that 180 quadrant, I know it has to be a negative and a positive. So H is going to be negative 6, 3. And then lastly, there's H prime. I'm going to do the same thing with J. J has to be in this upper quadrant. It's going to be right here. J prime. How did I know that was going to be the point? Well, I know it has to be a negative comma positive, so it has to be a -1 and a +3. Okay, so that's how we do 180. Now, let's talk about 90. We're going to take the same shape. Let me graph it. Here it is. F, G, H. That doesn't look like, nope, that's not right. That was supposed to be an erase. There we go. F, G, H, and J. Now it's going to be 90. Okay? So we're either going to be in this quadrant up top, which is positive, comma, positive, or we're going to end up in this quadrant over here, which is negative, comma, positive. Okay? So for rotating 90, what we do first is we flip the points. I'm going to make a different word. I'm going to say swap the points. Swap. And number 2 is change the sign based on where they're at, right? Based on what quadrant. So if I'm looking at F, F has to land up in this quadrant right here, because that would be rotating 190, one box over, right? So if F is rotating one box over, I'm going to take my 2, 1, and I'm going to swap it. So it's 1, 2. And now I look at my sign for that box, and I just put a negative in front of the 1. So it's a -1, 2. And that's my F prime. Okay, let's look at G prime. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to swap my points, right? We're looking up here. It says 7, 1. I'm going to swap it to 1, 7. But now what quadrant is it in? It's in this quadrant. Oops, wrong place. And it's going to be, it's off the graph. I apologize. That's G prime. So it's going to be a -1, 7. Let's look at H. Okay, now H and J are going to end up here in the positive quadrant. So they're both going to end up having positive numbers. So H, I flip them, -3, 6. But now I make the 3 a positive because hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's H prime. So now that's 3, 6. Lastly, I have a 1, -3. I'm going to flip them. But then I make that positive. And so that ends up there. So this whole thing gets rotated like that. If I can draw this, if they're going to let me, gets rotated that way. So if you can imagine that whole thing spinning up toward the left, that would be 90. Okay, for 270, we also swap and change signs. Okay, so for 180, we just change signs. For 90 and 270, we swap points and then we change signs. Okay, so we have our same shape. 2, 1, 7, 1, 6, -3, 1, -3, so F, G, H, and J. Okay, let's look at F prime. For F prime, if I go to 270, for F, this would be 90, this would be 80, this would be 270. So I know that this is going to be a positive, comma, negative point when it ends up there. Okay, so I know it's going to be positive, comma, negative. First, I'm going to swap 1, comma, 2, and the first point is going to be positive, second will be negative. So we have a 1, -2. There's F prime. Then we're going to do the same thing with G prime. I'm going to swap my points, 1, comma, 7, but now I make the second one negative. So that's going to be down here, G prime. And then I'm going to take H. I'm going to swap my points, -3, 6. All right, let's hold on a second. If I'm talking about H now, this will be 90, this would be 180, and this would be 270. So now it's going to be a negative, comma, negative. All right. So let me erase my numbers. That should say F. Okay. So now H prime will, I flipped them, but now that's going to put a negative in front of the 6. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, H prime. And then last but not least, we have J. I'm going to flip those, -3, comma, 1. However, it's negative, negative. So that one becomes a negative. So 1, 2, 3, -1, J prime. And now it's going to look like this. Okay, I think we are going to stop there. And I'll leave you here. Make sure you have your quadrant signs correctly. Okay, this is how they're going to be in every graph. So if you want to write them out for every graph, you can.